Kanda Mgume, and this is UG Votes Updates 2021. Now, tonight, my guest tonight is Joseph Chiza Kabuleta. He's a presidential candidate, and he says that he wants to give Ugandans back their financial freedom through financial liberation. But my question tonight to him is, how is he going to achieve that? Welcome with me, Joseph Kabuleta. Thanks for joining us tonight. Joseph Kabuleta, presidential candidate. Last time you and I had a chat, you were a presidential aspirant, and congratulations to your nomination.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you stand for financial liberation for Ugandans. Let's speak of the how. Looking deep into your manifesto, how do you want to achieve this?
In a number of ways, and there really is no, one size fits all, because Uganda is diverse and there are different regions, and each region, depending on the things that are of value in that region, has different ways in which we can achieve for them financial liberation. The central, especially the urban areas, have different ways, but then also we have the rural areas, and even in the rural areas, they are so fragmented based on the things that they can produce and that they are able to produce. But first of all, the financial liberation comes with the will of my government to actually see Ugandans prosper. That is the kind of will that we've not seen in this government. Actually, we've seen quite the opposite. So when you have that, and when you have a scenario where the government actually is working actively towards the prosperity of its people, then the how becomes a bit easy, because we have the how in the agriculture sector. We know how to achieve that. And we know what sort of prices we can give our farmers. We know how we'll remove middlemen who have been taking all the profit from the farm produce, and the farmers get really at the, at the bottom end of the barrel. We know why those middlemen have been put there. We know that they are not necessary. We know that we can create a free market economy in the farming industry. We can even create a diversion where the government actually can direct farmers on what to plant based on what markets we have across the world, and then give them expert agriculture advice, give them good seedlings, advise them on what fertilizers to use, and then take the burden of market off them by purchasing through perhaps government corporations and sending that produce to places.
I see.
So that's just for the agriculture. That's the how.
Okay, let's get to the other sectors. So the industry, what's going to define your industrial policy? Because Uganda right now is almost choking on multinational capital that has been injected into all these industries. So the local investors have not been given time and the incentives to grow their strength and be able to compete even internationally. What is Kabuleta's industrial policy?
First of all, that's one of the things that we've actually really been talking about in regard to local content and what it is that we should be getting from outside in terms of industrialization and things like that, as compared to what should come here. For instance, I could just pick one sector. If you look at the road sector, which is very huge because we're in the process of constructing roads and there's a lot of money being thrown around in that sector. But 70% of our roads are made by the Chinese, even roads that actually, and a lot of the subcontracting is not even given to Ugandans. And so you find that we've lost all our capacity to actually do something for ourselves. Now, when you go across board, let's say to Kenya, you find that anything below $10 million in terms of tendering for road construction has got to be done by local companies, road construction companies. It only gets foreign if it is something higher than that. Now, for us, in Uganda, actually, we tried that at some stage. We put a threshold below which it's strictly local people. And then, of course, the investors complained, you know the usual story. So what we did, we said that now any company which is registered in Uganda, regardless of what the ownership is like, can take these, these contracts. And as a result, of course, it's the same usual Chinese who came and took the contract, so it didn't help anything. But in Tanzania, they have theories on local content, which are very applicable and actually enforceable and enforced. In Rwanda, they have them. In Kenya, they have them. We do not have them here, at least not really enforceable. So you find that we've been choked out of almost, and that's just one sector I gave you, because that's what came to mind. But we've been choked, our local people have been choked out of so many sectors which are actually within their reach, which they can handle
Mm-hmm.
And then we get foreigners for them, yet actually we can build the capacity, as you said, of our local people.
Okay, so look, what I perhaps expect you to hear is your policy alternatives on how the farmers, for example, or even the local investors can access cheap local term credit, maybe at some point free prime land. You put off all the high tariffs on all exporting products, and perhaps create an environment where local investors are able to compete. So just look into your policy alternatives.
The policy alternatives, of course, have got to start with having a local bank, which we actually do not have right now. Now, the thing is, we have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 Kenyan banks in Uganda without any Ugandan bank in Uganda. And the Kenyan banks I'm talking about are actually local in Kenya. So you clearly see there is something terribly wrong now. So all our capital comes from outside, and there is no actual local capitalization. Now, when you have local capitalization, it focuses on things which are of interest to yourself as an economy. So, which is what, for instance, the African Development Bank came to do, because the bigger banks were no longer lending for infrastructure development and things like that. And so they created a segment where they lend to countries which are still developing their infrastructure, because much of the first world infrastructure is not a big deal. They have moved on to other things, whereas for us, we are still developing it. So we have to have one in Uganda, which, for instance, focuses on agriculture. There was the cooperative bank. It closed. Of course, you know about the Uganda Commercial Bank. So eventually we have nothing. So which focus on what it is the government is pushing at the time in terms of lending people to have this. Also insurance for those people based on that. Also them acquiring loans based on the fact that they are going to produce agricultural produce, which is going to be bought by the government. So in some way, actually the government is backing them up and saying, I have these acres of land, I need this amount of money to cultivate them. But after I finish cultivating, then the government is actually going to come and pay. Then I have the capacity to pay back the loan.
Okay, I hear your argument on ease access of credit facilities. But look, so Uganda is now at a crossroads, because early this year, government passed a budget of 32 trillion shillings for the 2020-2021 financial year. But it also projected that 21.8 trillion shillings would be collected in taxes. However, the pandemic, Uganda has been a victim of the pandemic, and you know what happened. Revenues fell, and now the projection is about 18 trillion shillings. How do we come out of such a big hole?
And the projection is just that, a projection. I don't even think we are going to achieve the 18 trillion shillings. But that said, first of all, we have to start thinking about the expenditure, because the budget that was read was 45-point-something trillion shillings. The amount of money which is expected, which was projected at the start of that budget, was less than half of that, about 21 trillion. You've said yourself it has fallen down because of COVID. And then before even, the ink that wrote the budget has dried, they're already asking for a supplementary budget. Now, there's a lot of indiscipline in our spending. If Canary ran his home the way Uganda is run, you would be in prison right now, because it is so indisciplined. You cannot run finances like that. You cannot consume yourself 2 times to what you earn. So what we have to do is, first of all, cut our balance of trade, but also cut down on our expenditures. There are so many expenditures that are unnecessary. We are spending so much on defense, yet we are not involved in any war. And yet there are things which are of importance to us, which are actually going to have production and increase production and cause a lot more taxes to be raised. Also, we have in excess of 70% of the Ugandan people outside of the income tax bracket, because they are earning far too little to be taxed. Now, the thing is, how can you have between 70 and 80% of your people outside of the income tax bracket? That means the 20% who are actually taxed are overburdened. That's why the taxes increase every time. Go and ask the importers, of goods from China and all that, and they will tell you how they are coming down under the weight of taxes.
Okay, so you want to introduce the tax
incentives? Because 20% are paying for the 80% who are not being taxed.
I see. So where do you draw the line between giving the tax incentives or reducing the number of taxes that these young businesses are paying and also making sure that you raise revenue? Isn't that going to be difficult to achieve?
No, as a matter of fact, thank you very much. That's a good question. As a matter of fact, it's not that difficult, because what we are having is plenty of taxes from a few people. Now, if we do the financial liberation that we are talking about and go, and because 70% of those people are actually involved in agriculture, some kind of agriculture. So if we turn that into a real business for them and move them out of peasantry into some kind of middle class where they are really earning money off their land, then they can also contribute to the taxes. And so we reduce the burden on the 20% who have been carrying it all these years, because we have now the 80% who are joining us and are getting to a place where they are being taxed. I'll give you an example. The tax threshold here for income tax for people who is 232,000 shillings a month. Below that, you are not taxed. Now imagine we actually have about 80% of people who are below that income tax threshold of earnings. Now, I mean, and then you think about what kind of life somebody has who earns 232,000 shillings a month. And then you realize that before you start pitting them or pitting that person, they actually belong to the privileged 20%. There are 80% who are below that. So you see there is something terribly wrong. Okay. And all the statistics we give about growth and what, they are all wrong. So when the financial liberation is achieved and we raise these people out of that penury, first of all, I can even tell the corporate people that we raise the threshold of income tax of the pay as you earn to 700 or 800,000 a month. Below that, you don't pay as you earn. And even those who are above that, we can cut it down to say 20% instead of the 30% it is. Okay. How do we achieve that? By increasing the number of people who are in that bracket. Right now, there are very few. Now, if we increase them, then we can reduce the burden. So that canary here can look at his salary, and the gross is not so different from the net. Okay. Because you have reduced your tax burden.
My last question to you is, so Uganda has been trying to industrialize the sectors. So my question to you is, how do we change Uganda's position in the value chain to be able to perform better and compete worldwide?
That's a good question also. Thank you so much for it. But the thing is, it cannot be at priority. And I think I've explained this to you before, because what we have is people who are in abject poverty. Now, even if you started talking about value addition and adding on the value chain and doing things like that, still you will have either the same 20%.
But you do not achieve socio-economic transformation without necessarily looking into improving, for example, the value chain position of the country.
This is exactly what I'm trying to explain to you. Now, after the initial steps of just getting everybody some kind of decent life, perhaps in 1 or 2 years, by just selling raw agricultural produce, because we can add value, but we are not yet at that place. What we want now is to get that agricultural produce immediately. It's like you have a piece of land, you want to buy, you want to build a house, you don't have money to build a house. So you sell half the land and get money to build the house. That's what I'm saying. So first of all, sell that maize as it is, sell everything as it is, and first get your life better. Now, when you're past the problems of looking for something to eat or some shelter, then now we start saying, now we can add value to our, all our agricultural produce. Now we start thinking about industry and things like that. That's perhaps 2 years after. Now we can say 80% of Ugandans are inside our income tax bracket. That means they're earning enough money to be taxed. And the key thing here is not them being taxed. The key thing here is they are earning so much money that now they cannot escape the tax, because we've taken them out of peasantry into some kind of middle income, middle income status sounds like a nation, but you know what I mean. So by expanding the base, which is not a difficult thing, by the way, it is not as difficult as people want to make it look, but by expanding that tax base, we first take people out of poverty, then we start adding value onto all our produce. By the third or fourth year of Kabuleta's government, there is no value we are losing by exporting raw things.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for making time. Joseph Kabuleta, he is an ex-sports journalist, pastor, and now presidential candidate, and he leads the Reclaiming Our Country and Kin movement, which he has termed as ROC. Now let's move on to the Ethiopia. There are mounting tensions in Ethiopia after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on Wednesday ordered the military to confront the Tigray regional government. For more on this story, we cross over to our partners in Washington, D.C., where VOA reporter Esther Gitue-Watt is standing by for us. Thank you so much, Esther, for spending time to speak to us. What do we know about the confrontations by the military in Ethiopia?
Thank you, Canary, for having me. Prime Minister Abiy is accusing the Tigray regional government's military of a deadly attack